So I mentioned yesterday that in this workshop, we're going to look at this question in a couple of really important ways. What are the compass and the tools by which we can alter the moral course of humanity on Spaceship Earth and create ways where everyone has the opportunity to thrive? So, compass and tools. There are two sections that I would like to cover today, and I'm not sure how much time to spend on either one, so I want to ask you. The tools that I would especially like to get a chance to talk about and have you participate in is identifying yourself as a Taurus of purpose in the world. I'm pretty clear that we're actually all the universe, and that's great. But we're also actually this Taurus, which is individuated. It's still connected with the universe, but it's individuated. And to the degree to which we're clear on the nature of our Taurus, our own human nature, isn't a lot, in my observation, the degree to which we can be effective in fulfilling our purpose, manifesting our passionate intent that Kimberly was talking about and they were doing in the workshop just before, and at the same time in unconflicted behavior. So I know a lot of people who have come up to me and said, well, I just don't know. I'm just one person, and this thing's so big, and I don't know if I can make that much of a difference and so forth. And over the years, I've been doing a lot of Solutions Summit workshops in cities around the world, and we've been finding a lot about what works. And one of the main things that works is to be very clear on who you are in relationship to changing the world. And there are several skills that I would like you to identify about yourself. The first one is to identify your purpose. Now, I'm not a big one for small talk. I mean, I can chit-chat for a little while, and so that's fine. It kind of grease the social wheels and so forth. But I'll be standing, at a cocktail party or a wedding or an event or something like that. And if it goes on for too long, I have a tendency to turn to someone and say, what's your purpose in life? Because that's what I really want to know. And so I've learned to ask it more and more gracefully. And I find it generates really interesting conversations because people begin to show up as who they are. And it's a relief to them ultimately, too. A lot of people have never asked themselves, what's my purpose in life? But I'm going to ask you to ask that of yourself today. And then I'm going to offer you the opportunity to identify the level of engagement that you would be interested in the world. And I'll say more about that later. Then the sector of interest that you're most drawn to, what issue of choice pulls you the most. And then we're going to talk about some tools for collaboration. At that level, it's mostly going to be describing to you what we're finding really working super effectively in activist causes around the world. There's not a lot of time to experiment with those, but I want to introduce you to them. And then we've got videos and all sorts of documentation on the website to guide you through learning the use of it. That has to do with our 12-sector model, effective ways to do research, to make decisions in groups, and to resolve conflict. Especially those last two are what tend to just kill one group after another. I was a professional conflict resolution facilitator for 15 years in Silicon Valley, so I know a lot about how miscommunications can destroy people's sense of mission and break a team apart very fast. And it doesn't need to be that way. And then finally, over the years, we've been very successful. Both Kimberly and I have been blessed with a lot of success in our activist projects way before we even knew each other. And then we've been exposed to so many incredible activists since Thrive came out that we've really spent a lot of time analyzing, okay, what works? And we put together something called 10 Steps to Successful Activism. And I'd like if we get a chance to run you through what those are, so you're at least familiar with them, and you might identify if you've had a project that didn't work, okay, where might it have broken down? And again, that's on our website. So that's the tools, and I'd love to spend some time on that. The other thing I want to go into is in relation to this liberty perspective. Now, yesterday, my talk confirmed things for some people and planted seeds for other people and dropped a bomb in their life for other people. Very interesting, full spectrum of feedback. And, I anticipated that because that's exactly what happened in my life, all three of those things, as I began to get exposed to it. So this is an opportunity, if you want, to interact more about but what about such and such? Because there are many of those that come up when anybody pictures a stateless society. What about security, and what about the roads, and who's going to take care of the poor, and the institutions are so big, how could they possibly get rid of them? All those considerations. And we can't handle them all. I've spent 10 years looking into in great detail how each of them is apt to play out or has previously and so forth. But we can touch into it. And then I can direct you to some bibliography of resources on that. And also Kimberly and I are in the process of writing a book on that right now. Because what we want to do for that area, for the whole liberty perspective, hasn't been done yet. Just like what we did in Thrive hadn't been... Sorry, the hotel Wi-Fi keeps cutting in here if I wait too long, so I need to move it here. Okay, so that section 2 is an exploration of the principle of non-aggression and the whole notion of a stateless society. Basically, how could it work? So we've got an hour and a half, and this is a workshop. This is not a show. And I want to find out how to apportion the time. So I want you to think about which one of these you're more interested in spending time on today. Because that'll help me in deciding how long we spend on it. So if you are most interested in the tools and collaboration, the whole tools section, part 1, raise your hand. Okay, the other option is part 2, the discussion, the exploration of the principles of non-aggression. How could that possibly work? Okay, so we're about split 50-50. All right. I'm planning on doing both. It's just a matter of which emphasis. I've had strong requests to do both, so I'm not going to abandon those requests, but this will help guide us. I don't know how long the discussion will be, just however long we want to take. The tools, I want to cover certain things. What's that? What is 4? Oh, the issue of choice. Yeah, I'll be going into that in detail right now. Okay, so I want to start with purpose. Because to me, everything starts with purpose. A lot of people think, well, I don't think there's really any meaning to life, and I don't feel any sense of purpose. And it was really my mentor, Arthur Young, who introduced me to the notion that nothing exists in the universe except as a function of purpose. So forget about that one. Even whether it's a chair or a bug or a human being or a cloud, it's all manifesting intention on some level. And to bring this home for human beings, one of the reasons why I really enjoy doing activist work with groups is because I so deeply know who people are that they tend to respond to having that recognized in them. And what do I mean by that? Picture yourself for a minute. You're standing on a beach. You're going to be participating in an ocean swimming race, a big one. Long one, big waves, the whole deal. There's a lot of people on the beach. You're standing there, you're looking both ways, and what you're looking at is over 60 million competitors. And then someone blows the whistle, and you take off. That's what everybody in this room did. 60 million, and you were the winner. That's a lot of intention. So I don't buy into this helplessness stuff at all because I know how much intention it took you to get here. And I know how brutal sometimes life can be, particularly to vulnerable children in ways that can mask your enthusiasm, your sense of self-esteem, your spirit, your mission, and so forth. So, but I love assisting people, no matter where they are on that scale, in getting in touch with and amplifying what their purpose is, so that you can actually fulfill your mission and create new life. So, what's purpose? The dictionary says it's an aim. It's the reason something exists or is done, made, or used. I am. Thank you. So this is to be distinguished from a goal. A goal is anchored in time and space. I'm going to go to that panel at whatever time it is this afternoon. I'm going to be there at a particular time in a particular place, and I'm going to experience that panel, and that's my goal. And when it's accomplished, you can check that off your list. A purpose is not anchored in time and space. It's a vector. It's a direction. So it's like going east. You may have goals along the way if you're driving to the East Coast or something like that, but a purpose would be, I'm going east. So same thing in life. What I want you to begin thinking about is, what is your purpose that isn't anchored in time and space, that's leading all of your goals? Archimedes said, give me a place to stand and I'll move the world. That's the power of the fulcrum. And to me, the fulcrum in your life is purpose. And once you get clear on it, you have a place to stand. I did a video for our website about this, and I'm not going to play it now. I want to spend the time more on interaction, but I led workshops for years, part of which was discovering your purpose. And then I collated the information from hundreds or thousands of people in their purpose and started sorting it. I love pattern recognition, and they fell into 7 categories. And they started, and there were people had purposes that reflected different dynamics. It's not the screensaver. I turned off all of that. It's. How do you do that?
There, I'm sorry. Right up here. Right there. Click on that.
That's the volume. That one?
There you go. That's it.
Okay. Oops. Come back.
You can turn it off and then fast at it.
Okay, thank you. So, in looking at purpose, the people's responses fell into these different categories, and sure enough, they had kind of a progression to them. And some people's purposes had to do with more learning, which I categorize as listening. It's like listening to other people, listening to the universe, whatever. Is my sound on? Yeah. Okay. And doesn't sound like it is. Audio guys, I'm not hearing my sound. Right. I said listen, and everybody cut out. So if you guys could, there it is. Okay. So, and then there was a category that was seeking, spiritual seeking or seeking for truth, whatever it was. And then there was another one that had to do with actually finding it, crystallizing it, nailing it down. And then another was, once you found it, like, experimenting with it. And then another was learning from it and then integrating it into oneself. And then the next natural one was protecting. And then, so that created a whole sort of circular form. And then it would move into another one where it was taking that same level of discovery and then teaching it, sharing it out at the next level. And I realized, it makes a toroidal dynamic. And all of a sudden I realized, I think that's what purpose is. Purpose is the energy dynamic of the Taurus that we each are. So it has all these different aspects. So at different times in your life, your purpose may reflect from the angle of seeking or the angle of experimenting or the angle of integrating or teaching or whatever. But it's still that wholeness that you are. And then the spin axis is your direction. So here's some samples of some of the purposes that people have come up with in this type of interaction. One person said, "My purpose in life is to learn how to live in optimal harmony with our natural environment and to teach others to do the same." Someone else said, "My purpose is to live as healthy a life as possible and to help others to heal and flourish." So there was the more environmental direction, there was the more health direction. And then someone I know quite well said, "My life purpose is to learn more and more to thrive and to share what I learn as effectively as possible with those who are interested. That's my purpose." So as I interviewed many people about this, there tended to emerge a pattern. This is not necessarily so for you, but a pattern of identifying a direction, sort of an area, a quality, a direction to the purpose, and then a second aspect of sharing that with others along the way. And I find that that's just a natural thing. When you integrate something and you get excited about it, it just seems to be part of human nature to share it. So it seems to be part of, for a lot of people, a whole sense of purpose. So what I'd like to do is have you take out something to write with and a pad and pen, and I would like you to write down, "My purpose in life is," and then see what comes. There's no right answer to this. There's one right answer, and it's yours. There's no wrong answer to it. And no one else knows better than you do what your purpose is. This could easily be a 3-day workshop just on finding your purpose. A lot of those go on, but I found most people can do it very quickly, especially this type of group. And you can keep working on it, but if there's anyone who would like to share what has come through for them as their purpose, raise your hand, and we've got a couple of people who can bring you a mic. Why don't you stand up, face the group?
Thank you. My purpose in life is to be the best that I can be as often as possible. Also, to use my mistakes as signposts to help me adjust my path, and to share that with others and or help them in any way that I can.
Beautiful, thank you.
My purpose in life is to help people toward a greater understanding as to what it means to thrive and to share with others ways to lead extraordinary lives.
Thank you very much. How about from this side? Teresa? Oh, sorry. Want to pass that mic along?
Hello, my name is Paul. My purpose in life is to explore life, relationship, love, and joy, and share my discoveries with everyone else.
Thank you. Imagine a cocktail party where everybody introduces themselves. "Hi, my name is Paul, and my purpose in life is..." Whole different level of discussions. Yeah. One more on this side. There's one in the
My
back.
purpose in life is to serve life.
Is to serve life. Okay, great. Thank you.
My purpose in life is to bring forth awareness about undereducated topics that serve humanity and support the greater good while living in joy, fun, and love always.
Thank you. One more, and we're going to need to move along. I just wanted to give you some examples. I'd love to hear everyone's, but there's not time right now.
My purpose in life is to remember my love, the interdimensional principles of sacred geometries known as physics, from a higher dimensional perspective than is presently understood on Earth. To test through experiment with these principles in the physical world, and to make available to share with others these principles in alignment with life and universal and divine law.
Thank you. Beautiful. Okay, the next thing I would like you to ask you to do is identify what sector, choosing from the sector wheel, that there are many groups using this. Barbara Marx Hubbard and a few others came up with this originally, and we've worked with her for many years. There's groups all over the world now using this, and all the solutions groups, over 1,000 groups in in our Solutions Hub network, are all using this same model because that allows people to coordinate all over the world. So health, infrastructure, justice, media, relations, science, spirituality, arts, economics, education, environment, governance, and there's actually a 13th. In the center is worldview. Now, I know everyone here has an interest in worldview, or you wouldn't be here this weekend. And if you want to do two, fine. For now, I wouldn't go more than two. Focus on one if you can, because that'll be useful in this exercise. But which of those sectors are you most drawn to? And sometimes it's the area where you have the most skill set already. That's great. It's powerful if you do. But it may be something that I was talking with a woman this morning who's just really shifted from arts to environment. So it's wherever your passion is. So write down what sector you're most drawn to. Yeah. Yeah.
If our purpose uses, like mine is shifting the role of the arts have in society, but it's going to impact health, media. That'll impact health, media, and spirituality, and those are all integrally connected.
Yeah.
But I really want to focus on is the shift. I'm focusing on shifting the way healthcare sees the arts, and how the artists see healthcare and a unique marriage.
Yeah.
How do I help my purpose be more refined and focused?
You know, of course, it could go either way. In your particular case, since I happen to know you, and for me, you embody the arts sector, I would start there and then see the others as directions that you can go with your arts. Yeah.
I'm a little bit confused from yesterday's conversation to one of the items over there, governance. I thought that you explicitly were against it, and now you have it as part of the wheel. So if you could explain the dichotomy, I'd really appreciate it.
Good. Yes, thank you. That is the sector that has the least interest in all of our Thrive Solutions Summit workshops. And there still is active governance. There are people who are involved in politics, who are involved in the Thrive movement, and usually they're in the process of trying to transform and ultimately eliminate politics. But if that happens to be your area of passion right now, then I would put down governance. Yeah. Question here?
In terms of governance, I think that it doesn't necessarily imply government, but there is a necessity for some mechanism for governance within any community. Mm-hmm. It's just that when it becomes institutionalized and becomes fossilized, that we end up with the kind of violent solutions that we have right now. So I don't think the governance is really at all inappropriate up there. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a governance. It can be an effective verb. I mean, you've got a governor on a motor on a lawnmower and that type of thing. But it needs to be distinguished from a mandatory authoritarian hierarchy. Okay, any other questions? Anyone else having an issue on resolving what their sector is?
I have
Joe.
one more question. Oh, she just.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see
sorry,
that.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Annalise. I'm wondering. My work especially focuses more in the center of interdisciplinary. I find myself in the middle of the web, more so in the worldview and consciousness shift. So I'm wondering if that's a part of,
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I figured. So.
Yeah, in this type of gathering, usually worldview and spirituality are usually the majority ones.
But if you want us to focus on different.
No, that worldview is fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and there was one more, Joe.
I would just love to hear your statement of purpose.
It was up there. It was the last one that was up there earlier. That one about thriving, that was mine. Yeah, I try to make a practice of not asking anyone anything I wouldn't be willing to answer myself. So, yes.
In terms of looking at these, like I said, it seems like worldview consciousness might be the center for me, but I'm looking at each of them some have lower glowing bulb and some glow brighter for me.
Right.
Are we looking for a lead and then we try to integrate those others? Is there a test to try to look where we fall for these?
I think it's whatever you use for your internal intuition. And it sounds like you have a kind of a kinesthetic visual glow thing that happens with you. Whatever's glowing the brightest for you, I'd use for now. Okay. Yeah.
Because I noticed there was a consistency with every purpose, and that was sharing with others, sharing with the world. Everybody who said what their purpose would included sharing with others.
Yes.
And so that's why I chose education, because I'm all over the map. So thank you.
I am too. So one of the things that we're all doing is developing our own inner navigation system, because no one has the right answers for you on what to prioritize and so forth. But as long as it feels right to you, that's the one to go with. Okay, I want to keep moving so we can get through this. Next, what I'd like you to do, in the center of this circle, there's 3 Tauruses. And this is what we call levels of engagement. The outside one, we call immediate needs. So if you're someone who wants to, with the time that you can allot, you want to, you're a doctor and you want to go to help out in Africa, or you're helping in a soup kitchen or something like that, that would be aspects of meeting immediate needs. Then the next one inside that is systemic change. Maybe you're someone who would rather be working on the political system or the economic system or the communication system. So you can be very powerful, obviously, working on systemic change, because an effective system is going to affect everyone who uses or is subject to that system. And then the third one, this will probably be a popular one with this group, is the consciousness shift. And that's like right at the heart of worldview. Are you interested in actually helping people clarify their worldview? And it's super powerful. That's right at the fulcrum, because their worldview is going to affect their actions, and the actions are going to determine their results. But none of the 3 of those are any better than any other. It's just which one is the one that really glows for you. So write down next, which is the level of engagement that you personally are most drawn to. Just those 3, immediate needs, the systemic change, or consciousness shift. Sorry, that might be hard to read from back there.
Have you ever identified percentages, like 70% worldview, 15%, or is it just...
No, that would be an interesting endeavor.
Like, you don't recommend it?
I certainly wouldn't prohibit it or discourage it. Okay, next I want the last part of this particular puzzle is to identify a particular issue, or maybe a couple of issues that you really want to focus on. Because this is where the rubber meets the road, coming down from purpose all the way down into, okay, this particular issue is where I want to put my efforts. And then we'll talk about more tools to actually do that. But what is the issue for you? Is it financial schemes? Is it holistic health? Is it dealing with GMOs, new energy, child trafficking, constitution protection zones, permaculture, whatever yours is? This is a partial list. You can see it's alphabetical. There's about 300 of them that groups in the Thrive Network are working on. So it gets very rarefied. But again, the thing is, where's the point of your pencil go?
Excuse me, Foster, I have a question. I have a question. The one at the very top underneath the blue, it says 9/11. Is that the incident, or is that the date that you compiled this?
You guess. I think numbers went first. Okay, good. So now you have already a more refined sense of who you are in terms of your Taurus of purpose than the vast majority of people on the planet. So I'd like a few people who haven't spoken yet to raise your hand, and I'd like you to just say what your list is. Your purpose, your sector, your level of engagement, and your issue. Would you stand up so that we can see you? Thanks.
Hi, my name is Mieke. Relations, consciousness, shift, and awareness.
And do you have your purpose also?
Yeah.
What's that?
My purpose in life is to find my unique voice, to express my truth joyfully and passionately with others, and show others it's possible for them to do the same.
Okay. And read the other ones one more time now that I have your purpose so I can hear it in the context of that.
Relations, consciousness, shift, and awareness.
So your specific issue is awareness? Wow, okay. All right, great. Who else?
All right. I'm right here.
Here comes the mic.
Test. All right. I haven't been writing, so I'm going to improvise. My purpose is cultivating kindness and intelligence and strength, and in education specifically, and also I seem to be interested most in consciousness shift and the systemic change.
Okay, and any particular issue?
My background is in building, and I would like to facilitate educating around life skills, and yes.
I didn't quite get it yet.
Okay, well, actually, there's another thing I'm doing, which is basically I'm enforcing constitutional issues.
Okay. But I'm curious about how the educational piece comes together with the building.
Okay, the educational piece, my intent is to develop a collaboration with people who actually take on students as we build homes and shelters for people.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, that level of specificity really not only clarifies it for you, but allows people around you to support exactly what you're up to. Yeah.
My purpose in life is to co-create a world for all inhabitants to live in an optimal virtue. The sector is education, the level of engagement is systemic change, and the issues are departments of education, both the state and the federal.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, purpose. I would like to figure out and work to bring about, and working with others to do that, a new paradigm that helps humankind reach its next level of potential. In the sector, I'm most drawn to, kind of in order, worldview, first of all, and economics, secondly, education, secondly, then economics, and then governance. And in terms of level of engagement, that would be the consciousness shift. And then the issue that I'm most interested in is equal opportunity, that everybody essentially gets the same starting point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
My purpose in life is to uncover my true nature.
Where are you? I don't know who's... Oh, okay, great.
Hi. And my purpose in life is to uncover my true nature and solidify my connection to God in every moment. My sector would probably be what I consider to be spirituality, with a specific and consciousness shift. And I'm interested in dreams and lucid dreaming, technology, and organizational development.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. My purpose is to find the truth about where the missing children of the world have disappeared to, locate as many, and bring them to, and reunite them with their families. So I know, actually, worldview and consciousness shift and education and human trafficking is what I want to focus on.
Excellent. Yeah, see, I get so inspired when I hear people declaring their stand in life like this. It's like that, for me, that embodies human nature. It's an expression of human nature. And when you're clear in the center of that torus of purpose, I think it's honoring and expressing your connection with God. You know, however anybody visualizes that, it certainly occurs to me that way. Okay, so let's do one more, and then we need to go on. Right, how about right here, Lori? Lori, did you give the mic to him?
My purpose in life is to decrease suffering on earth by expressing in writing the wisdom, insights, and experiences I have had and will have. The sector was worldview and a consciousness shift. And the issue I want to work on is by increasing awareness of what I see as hidden laws in the cosmos and the effect of living in harmony or out of harmony with those laws.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we were going to talk about principles, strategies, and tactics. So a strategy is a plan. It's important to know the difference between strategy and tactics, and oftentimes people who haven't been in the military or haven't been at a high level in corporations haven't made that distinction. So basically, a strategy is the plan. It's not the goal, but it's a plan for achieving the goal. And then a tactic is the maneuvers themselves. So once you have a plan, so if you know your purpose, okay, this is the direction I want to go, and then you set a goal, then you create a strategy to accomplish that goal, and then ultimately you've got to actually take step by step. And those maneuvers are tactics themselves. So I want to talk about the tactics specifically for a minute. One of the things that we did before the Thrive movie came out, but while we were making the movie, actually some in the Bay Area, many of you probably know this. Remember when George Bush Jr. Hand authorized a project to take $1 billion out of Homeland Security and start spraying 11 million people in Northern California with an unknown substance out of airplanes that would drone over us at night. And the funding and the authorization had been set aside to do this for 9 months a year for up to 10 years. And they wouldn't tell us what was in it. Well, you can imagine what that did for Kimberly and me. And at that point, we couldn't even say what we really thought was going on. But to make a long story short, and we touch on it in Thrive, we got the local activists together in our living room and said, we've got this sector model, and it can really help us organize, because people were just kind of running around panicked. I mean, literally, babies were being taken to the hospital, and fish were coming up on the beach, and butterflies and insects were just dropping in hordes. So we had a town hall meeting. Hundreds of people came. Then we had 12 tables set up where people signed up for the sectors. And all of a sudden, it turned all this kind of fear and chaos into a laser beam of effectiveness. The long and short of which is we ended up stopping that $1 billion project from the president and Homeland Security in 6 months. And it turned out to be just what I was afraid it was. The first thing we did within a few weeks was got Governor Schwarzenegger to stop the spraying and to make the companies reveal what was in. They said it was a harmless pheromone to confuse this particular moth. Well, it was a cocktail of 10 chemicals, 6 of which were either carcinogenic, mutagenic, or endocrine disruptors. Yeah, it was nasty. It was. That's right. Yeah. So that was one of many projects that we've used to analyze, okay, how did that happen? So here's really quickly, I want to take you through these 10 steps that we recommended, and we recommended these to the Shaka group in Hawaii when they were facing this GMO onslaught, and it was super effective for them. They too stopped Monsanto in their tracks. And of course, it's not over. It rarely is. The LBAM project, this moth spray project, was in 2007, and we stopped the actual spraying, but we filed lawsuits and all this stuff, and they actually didn't give up until about a month ago. So you need to just not give up. But anyway, so what we recommend to people is, number one, get informed about the issue. And so with the spray project, particularly the scientists, the people in the science group and the people in health group, these brilliant scientists and doctors and so forth from all over just started gathering the information. Some of them got on a plane, they went to New Zealand where this had happened before, and they investigated, and they're investigating the moths and the chemicals and all this stuff. And within a couple of weeks, we had hard and fast information about what was really going on in the issue. Kimberly and I headed up the Follow the Money, the economics team, and it took us about 3 weeks to trace this all the way back up to President Bush and be able to verify all of that. And then we used the Solutions Hub to aggregate resources. So we ended up doing a process where every sector group would meet once a week. And then they would choose some representative from the group who would have another meeting a week on Sunday nights. All the heads of all the sectors, or the representatives of the sectors, would all get together. And they would share what was going on in each of the sectors. And then they would kind of come up with a plan, a coherent plan, and then take it back to each of their sectors, within a few days. And so we got basically this toroidal energy flow going, where there wasn't any top-down hierarchy, but everybody was informing everyone else, and all 12 sectors, all representing the vector equilibrium, the natural structure of harmony in nature, all of those sectors were represented, and we had the Taurus communication flow going. So it was profound for us. We hadn't used this model before to see just how well it worked. Once we start aggregating the resources like that, in each group we would articulate, if we're successful with this, what would it look like? So then you've got your goal in mind. And then we assess, okay, what are the most highly leveraged actions we can do? So the doctors are doing this, the media team is doing this, the relations team are making sure we all get along and so forth. What are the most highly leveraged actions? And then identify what actions you will participate in and what roles or functions are still needed. Because one of the great things about this is that even within a small group, every sector ends up getting represented. So if you were part of the, if you chose the science sector, raise your hand. Okay, there's a few scientists in the room. If it was relations, raise your hand. Okay, education, spirituality, worldview, media. Okay, so I could go on, every single sector would be covered. And all of a sudden the community realized, we've got it covered. And I just get to do what my calling is, what I'm passionate about, what I'm good with. And so people can relax about it. One of the problems with activism is people get really burned out. And one of the reasons is they're trying to save the world by themselves, or even if they're with a team, they're trying to cover everything with a very few people. So the next one Yes, that's correct. Yes. I can't get into that now because I've just got a few more minutes to get through this so we can go on to the other one. But if you go to the Solutions Hub on our website, we've got videos and documents and everything that describe just how it works. Okay, just really quickly so that you get this in mind. I don't expect you to remember this, but just so that you can feel the progression of it. So determine how to communicate your issue. Once you get the truth, the whole key is getting the truth. But once you get the truth, then you're going to have a story. In all these issues, it's so dramatic. You know, when somebody tries to break down the wholeness of a natural system and you discover it and you get the truth about it, some sort of media will follow you. Fortunately, in this issue, we got major media all over the Bay Area and then ultimately even national media, and that really started the retreat on the part of the usual suspects. So how to communicate it, and then the media comes in really handy there. Get as much media coverage as possible to educate people, and then use grassroots activism and the legal system. So we had high-level lawyers, you know, guided by Danny, filing all these lawsuits and everything, and we also had people making posters and out in the streets. We took over the pedestrian pathways of the Golden Gate Bridge for an afternoon. We didn't stop traffic, but we were there in a presence, and people crossing the bridge were all honking and waving and everything, and that gets, of course, a lot of media attention. And none of this, I mean, the entire thing for 6 months to stop this thing, except for the lawsuits, which were a little more expensive, but mostly the lawyers were doing it pro bono. The whole thing cost less than $50,000, which just got raised. I mean, obviously, there was a lot of volunteer time, but you don't have to be super wealthy to get these things done if you know how to do it. Okay, then when you're successful, celebrate the accomplishments. Another thing that keeps activists going is to actually make sure you're having a good time as you go along. It's so fun to be working with people in concert, and then when you have success, take some time off. Take a night and, you know, have a party. Just enjoy it. And then when it's done, one of the main things I kept stressing to the group, and when I was in the media around that, is this is just one, and we're going to win this. But the real jewel out of this whole thing is your email list, because this is your network in your local area who care about these things. So they've tried several others since then, and the community would activate so fast that they would just say, "Uh-oh, no, we're not going to do this." And I'll tell you one, kind of our trophy for this was that somebody filed a Freedom of Information Act with the California Department of Food and Agriculture that was actually organizing this whole thing. So we got a bunch of their internal emails, and one of the internal emails said, we expected some resistance from Santa Cruz, but we didn't know it would be this well organized. When they see that coming, that changes their mind. And we were in their face. You know, we would have meetings with these people and literally get face to face with them and say, you know, this is our children that you're poisoning. This is our organic gardens, and we will never stop, and we will hold you personally liable. So don't think you're just, you know, some bureaucrat making a decision here. This is your life, and this is our lives. And you could see they would freeze. They were not used to this, and we weren't being disrespectful. We were just being really direct. So I think it was a relief for all the bureaucrats, and then not to be caught in the middle of that. Okay. So that's all the time that I'm going to spend on this for now, and I wish we had time to do questions and tell stories and everything. I think you need to hold this up because I really want to have the time for this next topic. So in relation to liberty, remember, we are talking about creating a transition, like I described yesterday, in stage one of bringing integrity to the current systems and helping those most in need. Then shrinking government to the protection of individual rights and the commons. And finally, moving beyond even minimal government into a truly stateless society of voluntary association where there are rules but no rulers, where there are organizations, but they're all voluntary. So I want to ask you a question. If there were a way to have accessible and good roads, education, and healthcare, help for the poor, a respected system of justice, and so forth, without anyone being violated against their will, including an involuntary income tax, would that be of interest to you? Would you want that? So raise your hand. I mean, literally, if you would be interested in that. Okay, because that raises the possibility. Because so many people think, oh, don't want to let go of the government. But I think in most cases, it's because they simply assume that it couldn't possibly work, which is just how landowners felt about, trying to do an economy without their slaves. Another question. When, if ever, is it okay for someone to coerce or violate someone else, except in authentic self-defense or in helping someone else defend themselves? You're always defending an innocent person who's doing no harm. So these will be questions for our discussion, but I want to get 3 of them on the table. Hold on just a second. We're going to discuss these in a minute, but I want to get them all up here. So, is an authoritarian power using coercion necessary in order for humans to be compassionate? Now, this is one of the major ways that we've been trapped, I believe, in this passionate intent but unconflicted behavior. Because the expression of our compassion has, to such a great degree, been funneled into what the government does with our taxes, because the government's going to take care of the sick and the poor, and the government's going to protect us, and they're going to take care of old people, and they're going to resolve disputes and so forth. And to some extent, they throw a few crumbs and do a little bit of that, but obviously not very well, given the condition that we're in. So I think it's really important for each of us to ask ourselves, do we have the capacity to be sufficiently compassionate without doing it at the point of a gun from the government? If we don't, then we're in real trouble. But, well, I'm going to leave it at that. And now I'm going to open these questions up and any other questions that you have about what I brought up yesterday, or concerns that you have, confusions that you have about this whole issue of non-aggression in our lives. So, actually, what I'd like you to do on this is actually come up and make a little line if you would like to discuss this or ask a question about it. This will help me a little more with the timing, too.
You want to go first?
Okay, so go ahead and start with your first question.
So I'm going to be using some concept that people are going to think they're suspect, but it's probably going to be the first thing that goes through a Republican mind right off the bat as soon as you put something like that up here. So I'm going to play the devil's advocate. As soon as they see number 2, for example, or number 1, they say, well, you guys are in your utopian mindset out there in California with your liberal ways, and therefore, of course, I'm a landowner or I have property and whatnot, and the majority of the people are not so educated, compassionate, etc., which is, the serfs of the world are, you're going to allow lawlessness and, people who are less educated to make the rule of chaos. So what's the response to that? Because right off the bat, there is something to that as well, from a practical perspective.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to tell, for example, people in Echo Park of LA, for example, hey, it's not correct to go out there and start looting in Beverly Hills. That's what
Sure.
pops into everybody's head. And even if they're, if it doesn't, subconsciously does, and they don't want to actually utter it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's probably the one that comes up first for most people is my security. Who's going to protect me? Because we've really been trained into being provided for by the nanny state and protected by the daddy state, except they don't do a very good job of either one. And so I talked a little bit yesterday about this three-legged stool. And this is a fluid dynamic amongst three different perspectives. And the one in the upper right-hand corner is independent security companies. So most of us don't have the martial arts skills or the weaponry or the time or the interest to always be able to protect ourselves and our loved ones. So what would you do? If you couldn't do it yourself, what would you do? Well, you know, if you didn't know how or were physically incapable of mowing your lawn, what would you do? You'd hire someone who wants to do that. And you'd compensate them appropriately, so it was a successful voluntary exchange. So there would, of course, be independent security companies, just like there are at shopping malls and corporations, and a lot of communities have their own security. So the key to this, I mentioned a little bit yesterday, is that a lot of people think, oh, Blackwater, yeah, we just have a bunch of mercenaries going around, you know, working for the bullies. And no, to whatever degree anyone or any organization is bullying, then they would be, the human beings involved would be personally liable. So they would be held to account, which obviously they aren't now. They would be prosecuted, and if it was proven they were violating someone, they would have to make restitution, not to the court, not to the government, to the people they actually harmed. If they were incapable of just making amends and living harmoniously in society, then they might have to be incarcerated. But in many cases, that wouldn't even be necessary. So you'd have these independent security companies that have to compete with one another to stay in business. So what would allow them to stay in business? Well, as any business owner knows, first thing you got to do is get insurance. Because if something bad happens, you're out of business if you don't have it. So you'd have to buy insurance, and the insurance company would have very high vested interest in making sure that you don't violate anyone, because otherwise they're going to have to do big payouts. And so all of a sudden you've got the vested interest of a private insurance group in the private security corporations, all with the motivation to be not only non-violating, but to be cost-effective, to be reliable, honest, all that stuff. You know, be a good business, providing a good service, reliable at a low cost, or lowest possible cost. And then when there are any problems, of course, you've got to work those out. And this is where the idea of DROs, or dispute resolution organizations, come in. So it's a little bit like a justice system, but the big difference is they don't have a monopoly. They're not protected by this idea of this centralized power where a few human beings have rights that nobody else has, like making money, using the military arbitrarily, giving big subsidies and bailouts and so forth to their cronies. All that goes away when you've got independent dispute resolution organizations. And well, be careful of the collective generalizations. A mob or a miscreant group, what are they made up of? They're made up of individuals, and any individual who mugs somebody on the street is going to be hauled in by the security companies, which are working for either the individuals or the insurance companies or both. What's that? Well, what's a community? Exactly. So a group of people can get together if they want to, without coercing someone just because they live next door to them, and then they hire a security organization. And this is where they all blend together, because the insurance groups are going to be very interested in the behavior of the security companies. In fact, they're going to be insuring them. And And when you get into gray areas, areas like pollution, if somebody's either overtly or covertly allowing pollution in the water or in the air or something like that drifts over into someone else's land, then that's a gray area. So when there are gray areas, then it'll be brought to the dispute resolution organization, and as the disputes are resolved, then that begins to create precedents in law. And law, in my opinion, the way it is right now, is just an opinion with a gun. There's so many, thousands and thousands and thousands of arbitrary laws, which you and I don't even know, but we're still subject to them. And most of them are passed, like the omnibus bill, at Christmas time. What was it, a $1.3 trillion budget or something like that? Nobody ever read it. And they stuffed all the bad stuff in at the end because that's the only way they could get it through. That all goes away because individuals are liable. So if a mob's on the street, if a gang is on the street, then security companies are going to be called immediately. Each one of them is going to be held accountable. But it's the same thing for an organization. If a corporation is violating, then the corporation would be hauled into the dispute resolution organization. But it wouldn't be just a fine against the corporation or something like that. Individuals would start to be held liable. You could get insurance, but you're not going to have the liability protection that the government gives the big corporations right now, where you can't hold individuals accountable. So that's just some of the ways. I don't have the definitive answers to all of this, even after 10 years of intensive study, but the more I look into it, the more it's the first coherent kind of perspective that I've seen, but there'll be all sorts of things we can't even imagine now where human creativity will solve the problem like it did with slavery. But it'll always have the compass that I was talking about before. This is the compass. I talked about the tools, but the compass, you always come back to the non-aggression principle. Okay, let's on to the next one.
This is 21st century Ubuntu, where the tribe would sit around and they'd shine the light on its personal responsibility. Thank you for bringing Ubuntu back to the 21st century. My question came up when you were talking about your activism exposing the brown moth spray. And, and most of us know in this room that we're being sprayed every day with aluminum, barium, strontium. And this might not be the right time because this is a whole nother issue, but because that's my activism. My primary is geoengineering and exposing it. We can't stop it until we expose it, and it's not fully exposed yet. With your efforts through eradicating the moth spray, is that something that you're all working on? I assume so, or a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Ubuntu, and shine the light where there is darkness. That's my purpose.
The two most excruciating things for me personally in my daily life these days are not having sufficient money to give to these incredible healers and new energy inventors and so forth who are literally being harassed, their lives threatened and all of that. And I think that's going to change soon. But just every day I wrestle with that inside. And the other one is I live in the hills outside of Santa Cruz with a really big sky. And I walk out there and the majority of the days I'm watching these things crisscross and realizing that I'm having no choice about breathing that. And my community, my family, my grandchildren, the same way. So the problem that we faced at the spraying from 1,000 feet over Northern California is exactly the same issue that is now at 30,000 feet over pretty much the entire civilized world. So it is an area of big interest. To me, after nuclear weapons and nuclear power, as we see with Fukushima, the geoengineering is the second most deadly issue on the planet. So we're really working on that. Yeah. We've got, in our Thrive Connect group, we've got 4 different geoengineering groups that we're working with to do everything from media about it to this one guy's got a whole project that we're looking for funding for where he's got people already lined up. I won't even say where it is because I don't want to put a bullseye on his back, but he's got a plane with testing equipment where he'll fly up and go behind these tankers and actually take the samples from the air. And then we've got lawyers ready to go. The most critical part of this, besides just having the money to do it, is private investigators. Because when you go after, it's like Michael Murphy made these films about why are they spraying and what are they spraying. Well, he intentionally left who are they spraying for last because that's the most dangerous. And when you're going after that information, you better have skilled private investigators who know how to protect themselves because they will stop that exposure that you were talking about at any cost. So it needs to be really well done. But yes, we're definitely on that, and I'm glad to hear that you are too. Yeah.
Yeah, my questions have changed quite a few times since I've been standing here, so I'm going to kind of improvise yet again. The one thing I just want to comment about what this gentleman was talking about as far as, mob or whatever, that the victimless crimes are, such as drug use, are actually caused by the coercion of government to prevent and to criminalize that, and then it empowers things like mobs. And I think those problems would go away if we were to just recognize that there is no crime unless there is an aggression. Someone's using drugs to compensate themselves for some kind of thing that happened to them in their lives or whatever. It's like that kind of thing can be cleaned up just through support of the community, and it doesn't need to be criminalized. Yeah. And the other thing I just want to say is with regards to the community getting together to hire security companies. This is actually what governance is. And what governance is subject to us. And that's the thing that has been flipped around with the current situation is that the government has presumed to be imposing itself around victimless crimes. Yes. Okay, and then the only other thing that I just want to bring up is the thing that concerns me is that with regards to imposing, I'm going to cite something, I'm going to bring something up, and what it looks to me is like the imposition, or actually it's actually an indirect coercion, and it's by way of the presumption, the actual presumption of the nature of property itself. Like we're saying, you don't take people's stuff. What is the moral code that defines what someone's stuff is? You know, Locke is talking about use and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm specifically talking about land. And one of the main ways in which we are impoverished and are enslaved is through the indirect land speculation and monetary valuation of land. It's done over most of our heads, and I just want to call attention to that, and I want to bring that into the discussion because I think it's really important that we redefine, reestablish our relationship to land and how it fits in the whole scheme of how we respect what would be called property.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I want to add one more little bit to the geoengineering because it brings to the fore a really critical example. I got in a lot of trouble with some of the citizens of Santa Cruz around this spray issue because naturally, for a lot of people, the answer was, they can't spray us. We're going to put it on the ballot, and we're going to vote, and we're going to show them we won't be sprayed. And I said, well, what if we lose that vote? You know, they can rig the voting machine. Not many people know what's actually going on with this. So do you think that your majority vote should determine whether or not my grandchildren are getting sprayed with poisons? And it was an intense debate over weeks. And for a lot of people, not a lot, but for some people, they never got it. But when we're working with the geoengineering groups and GMO groups and so forth, this is a really critical thing that we tell them, that if your end goal is a political initiative, then you may or may not win it. But in the long run, where you stand is not on gathering a majority, even if you can do it. It's even in the California Constitution, which we found, and used. It declares the right of every individual to maintaining their own health. So that was ultimately the basis on which these suits got filed. Individual basis, not statutory basis.
Yeah. A comment on that before I ask the question I was going to ask. I think it was Ben Franklin who said a democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. And that a constitutional republic like America was where everybody has a gun. So the sheep has the right to self-defense against the majority vote, that there are, in fact, inalienable, self-evident rights, that even if everybody else votes against it, that one remaining individual still has that right. So thanks for taking that stand, and that's part of the education of the immorality of democracy, right? There are individual rights that are self-evident. And that relates to my question directly. Radical voluntarism is our goal, as you've articulated, or at least if I've heard it. And I dedicate my life to that, to individual liberty, to voluntary relationships among human beings. I said at the X conference that Steve Bassett did about a decade ago, I'm absolutely confident there are 0 Republicans and 0 Democrats anywhere in the universe except for on this one backward planet, right? But there are libertarians out there, or if you want, radical voluntarists out there. So my question is, based on what we know of the advanced extraterrestrial life that's clearly engaging us in some way, do you feel that they're radical voluntarists as well? Can we imagine that that advanced life would ever tax each other or prohibit each other from any kind of consumption that might be beneficial, or whatever the crazy things that we do down here that diminish liberty? Do we see them as libertarians?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and thank you for that. Joe's been a long-time peaceful warrior for liberty, so thanks for being here and commenting, Joe. One of the main reasons I'm particularly interested in this issue is because this is the first morality that I found that's universal. And with all of the increasing pressure for disclosure and I think a fairly imminent change in the paradigm about being alone in the cosmos, it's going to be a big issue. And I see the same way people get kind of awed by political figures or, wealthy magnates or something like that. I see a lot of people getting awed by interdimensional beings or extraterrestrials. And God, they got the most amazing technology, and they're telepathic and all this stuff. And if that leads to the next regime, but now it's an extraterrestrial regime, we would have missed the whole point. I think one of the reasons why we're being watched right now is not just because we're at risk of nuclear contamination throughout the cosmos, but because human beings are actually onto this liberty thing. And you look at Star Trek and you look at Star Wars and so forth, they don't have a clue about it. It's all about, they're the good Federation, but they're still involved in wars all the time. Yeah, and I had a chance to spend a couple of days with John Mack. Actually, Kimberly and I met at John Mack's house. This was shortly before he died, and when I had a chance to be alone with him, I asked him, I said, John, I've always wanted to meet you and ask you this question. Are there bad ETs? Yeah. And because he was way more familiar with the issue than I was at that time. And he said, well, I think it's the wrong question. He said, because I had assumed that if they're traveling intergalactically and warping time and space and so forth, I had assumed that they got past the self-destructive technology phase, and they had actually mastered harmony in a way that they could survive and thrive for millions of years, potentially longer than we have. And he said, well, it's a tempting notion. He said, but look how far advanced we are beyond the rat. And look how so many of our scientists treat them in our laboratories. And that was a humbling moment. He said, it's not that they're here because they might do us damage because they're mean. It's just that they may be experimenting with us. They may have run out of planets, or theirs was destroyed and they want one. And, we're obviously retarded beings or something like that, so they think they deserve it better than we do. He said there's no guarantee. His belief was that there's all different agendas of different species, and whether or not it's benevolent is more from our point of view. And I think we need to be really careful of that. And to me, it's another example of the compass works there, and the compass is non-aggression. We don't get to violate them, and they don't get to violate us or our property. Okay, go ahead.
I think that raises a good question because everybody wants an answer. They want the answer. And in meditation and other things, the answers always come from within. but they come from within when it comes with a guidance that's interconnected with a greater source, of which it's not outside us, it is us. So they say, I didn't write the book, the source did, but actually you're part of the source. So I think we're all putting our own piece on creation, and that by our very existence, our very being, by the love we create, we change the world and creation inextricably. But when we come together, when we align with others, we can add our ripples on the pond in that vibration and thus create more. So is the government bad and we're good? What I'd say is it's all happening at once. It's a cacophony. And if you look at nature, if you look at the principles of nature and the universe, that's exactly what's happening. It's a cacophony. Stars are being born and created, but we see born and created. We don't see that all the nuances happening, billion cells together, working and living and dying and falling off us and recreating more so that we can have this experience. And we don't even know what they're doing right now. So if we think of alien species and other higher intelligent forms, they could be taking every form of possibility and exploration and self-examination, and they could have selfishness or maybe not, as you see in Star Trek. But that existence, we have our existence. We need to take charge of that, look into that, become what we can in our imperfect way, make our mistakes. And I think that if we make those mistakes with this idea, that we can still make the bigger mark. We can still hit the larger target. We can still paint the bigger picture with many brushes and still come out okay. So I had a couple of comments based on what you were saying. And one of the things I saw with that last model, if you went back, is that it poses the real question of inequities and inabilities. It's weaker community, poorer community. Happy, weak community gets overrun by another, and it's kind of the model of humanity. But that with your insurance model and the other models, that number one, if those are nonprofits, like insurance companies are supposed to be nonprofits, but they're not. I have friends who are headhunters for insurance companies. They have a book of 3,000 names, and all those executives in that book make over $250,000 a year, and that's not including the benefits. With benefits, it's $300 to $500.
In my model, just so we're clear, I'm not saying that these had to be nonprofits.
Right. No. I'm saying I think that I'm imposing that idea over it, that nonprofits are maybe small profit, hold the profit back for bonuses for things that function.
I hope you're superimposing that idea, not imposing that idea.
Superimposing it. So then the idea is if we have an outside body oversight, rewarding those people for doing well, rather than banks bonusing their own people, that the outside says, hey, you did a great job, thanks, save money.
Who's this outside body that's doing the rewarding?
Well, that would be communities. So that's the problem is how do we get the voice? So what I'm looking at...
You're losing me in 3 levels of we, community, outside voice. It sounds very collectivist to me, like something's creeping in here I don't understand. So
what I was looking at with, I'm just off the top of my head, when you were going back to these 3 types of models, that one of the things is one community might have one private insurance company or might have their own goons or protectors. And that,
no, they're not goons. They get thrown in jail if they're goons.
In pun, because if you have a hierarchical ring of influence, in other words, you have a small town has theirs, and then they make several towns to have another ring of influence, that those hierarchical rings of influence can overlap each other. So that instead of being protected by one company, you're protected by your local and then your regional, sort of like we have counties and cities and state, and it works. So that those can have overlapping influence. So that the voices of those communities...
If you want to pay twice, you could hire 2 different organizations, but you got to be very careful of moving away from the individual on this, because as soon as you have, like, I don't know what you're calling a city or a county or something like that, then you start into battles between authoritarian structures of these collectivist ideas. So I'm getting a little lost. I'm not sure where you're going with this.
That's okay. I'll go on to the next one, which when you were talking about the geoengineering, one thought or comment I had on that is there's got to be more than one reason that these people would be spraying this, and I've heard different reasons purported, and we've interviewed people on the show, and they say this and that reason. What I'm looking at is based on what I know about energy waves, free energy, and also on chips and tracking, is that if you were to put these kind of substances up in the air, that they're going to fall to the earth and filter, they're going to end up in the biosystem in our systems. And that with these things, my thought process is that by microlyzing these atomizing these products that they can stay in the jet stream for a long time. And I'm thinking that they're figuring out how to make these chemtrails, because they get a lot of attention, smaller so they disappear faster, because I've noted that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've noted that sometimes the skies seem free, but they still look silvery shiny, and I haven't seen them for days. When we went to Costa Rica, I saw deep blue skies like when I was a child. And if you look at all the pictures when you're a kid, nobody talks about this. There aren't pictures of these things streaking across the sky. They disappeared.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is that these aluminum bariums and such are being absorbed in the body. There's a few reasons that that could be advantageous to them. And one is that with resonant energy, you can tune to things. And it's very easy to tune to a set product like a metal, so that those could have resonating properties. In other words, that they could, and now, by the way, with satellite technology, we know they can beam lasers and focus cameras and all that. There's a lot of information on this. So that you could actually track an individual by satellite. I met with a guy, my dad had a guy to dinner in the 70s who told us about
I'm going
technology.
to need to ask
Okay.
you to keep it short because we got 3 people behind you and we've only got 8 minutes
with
left.
the technology he told me about in the 70s that's all come to light now in following years, it'd be very easy to track an individual and be able to focus a beam on that individual, or even record or have your information recorded in that and take it when you go down the highway. You could be metered so that they could be watching us with that, and also controlling us or affecting our minds or dumbing us down. So that
Yeah,
was
and they've also got microfibers that are self-organizing and becoming little antennas.
kind of what I'm
so,
talking
yeah.
about. So you're absorbing those, and that could
Yeah.
be part of the end game as first chip in it.
Okay.
I got lots more, but
Thank you,
let the next
Don.
person go.
Hi, I had a lot of things that I realized as I was standing there that they condensed down to one that I'll call shadow management. And I mean that on the personal psychological level, like what assumptions do I come to the community with based on the aberrations I'm imprinted with by virtue of my personal upbringing? And how does that impede my participation and my positive impact on the community? That's one level. Take it into the community level. What could happen in the community due to a lack of shadow management? For instance, I think about how the current system seems to favor sociopathic personalities gravitating towards positions of power. A yet another level might be do we become the pets of our robots? You know, like right now we're becoming highly reliant on technology, and in the name of convenience, we turn over major portions of our lives to the technology, and that's yet another shadow aspect. So rather than say a whole lot about it, it's like I'm very interested in the question of shadow management.
These are a couple of the kind of gruesome details that we're all going to need to be facing one way or another, and that's why I'm spending this time focusing on the compass and the tools, because the tools are great, but they're useless without the compass. And so, as Kimberly was talking about, as we're moving into this transhumanist area, which we are, like it or not, we are, to me, it's like moving into the extraterrestrial contact area. Like, how do we navigate something so dramatically different? And to me, it's with the non-aggression principle. So, you know, if you want to, you know, replace your body parts with, you know, super strong ones, fine. There's certainly going to be a lot of blessings for health issues and so forth. But just like with vaccinations, don't impose your transhumanist technology on me. Don't limit my life in any way because of your dream of uploading human consciousness into computers. So all these rabbit holes are so deep and so gory and so big in so many ways. But you come back to the recognizing the need to restore the wholeness of natural systems and operating through the non-aggression principle, and all of a sudden they're all just the details of the same task, and it's actually incredibly simple. Okay, one more.
Just one thing about the transhumanist.
No, let's wait, because this guy's standing in line for his turn.
So I love the idea of complete voluntarism, and the only way coercion is allowed is for self-defense or protection of property. And however, in order to implement that and really get a lot of people on board, I think what's needed is a very clear and expansive definition of what self-defense actually means and what property actually means, as the previous speaker implied. That is a very deep and complex question that really requires a great deal of self-knowledge. And so, for example, and the superficial idea of, well, self-defense or property is something that is debated and creates conflict, for example, between people who consider themselves primarily libertarian orientation versus primarily liberal or orientation. They're going to have a huge difference in opinion. So, what are we going to do to really get that conversation started, to implement the structures that will allow us to access our deep wisdom and answer the questions of what are these concepts, and then how do we move forward from that?
Good. Yeah, thank you. And that's where I'm excited about moving into the phase where law emerges from responsible conflict resolution. Let me show you one thing here. Ethics, I find a really useful definition of ethics is any theory regarding preferable human behavior that is universal, objective, consistent, and binding. And the key here is that preferable behavior means objectively required. You know, you might prefer jazz, I might prefer classical or whatever, but we both require food to stay alive. So when you move into the area of ethics, if you're going to be universal and you're going to be consistent, good luck finding ethics that don't align with the non-aggression principle. Because as far as I can tell, that's the beginning of universality. And another really key point about this is that what's the relationship between ethics and morals? Again, most people, they don't discuss it usually in school. But morals, it's kind of like strategy and tactics. Morals is a set of rules claiming to accurately and consistently identify universally preferable behavior. So the key here is a lot of people say to me, it's a nice idea about this utopian world, but people simply aren't mature or responsible enough to not have the government. And let me take you through a little thread here, because if you actually have sick people in the world who do damage to other people, the most destructive thing you could do is have a hierarchy where they naturally rise to the top of that and then have control over everyone. And a lot of people say, well, we're not really going to have this world until everybody's enlightened. Well, if I had to depend on that, I would not be a happy camper. I would be hopeless. But I don't depend on that, because to me, if we can agree on ethics, then the rules can come from the ethics rather than some arbitrary political power. And we do agree on the ethics. Every human being I've ever found agrees they don't want to be violated against their will. That's it. That's the ethical agreement. And then if that gets reduced to morals, which is this set of laws, but the laws are only about the protection of those individual rights, then it gets very simple. There will be gray zones for sure that need to get continually worked out in these dispute resolution organizations and so forth. But if the laws reflect a universal ethic, that to me is when humanity's chance of surviving and thriving all of a sudden has crossed the tipping point. It actually gets so simple, it's almost like, no, wow, could it actually be that simple? Of course, that doesn't mean that it's easy in terms of the education and people integrating this into their lives and so forth. It took me my entire life. I was 58 when I finally got this. And I'll tell you, it's just released my own spirit and my sense of what's possible for humanity in super exciting ways. Now, I had up here just a moment ago, we're out of time, let me just close with this. There is oh, sorry. This is a partial outline of the book that I'm writing right now. Because I've identified over the last 10 years the most common mind traps when I have this conversation with people, whether they're conservative, liberal, male, female, old, young, whatever. These are the most common mind traps where people just go to a yeah, but thought and then don't go any further in the conversation. So I want to, in the book, elucidate the actual deeper responses to each one of these. You know, but what about the good of the group? And what about fairness? You know, we need to take money from these people and give it to that because it's only fair. These people got too much, and those people don't have enough, so we go there. Services, what about the roads and schools and so forth? Everyone should have the right to basic necessities, you know, the Bernie stuff. You know, free education, free health care, free houses, and so forth. 2 + 2 does not equal 5. None of that stuff is free. It's taken from someone against their will to do that. There are healthy, natural, moral ways to raise everybody's living standard without having to aggress. Protection. Money is the root of all evil. No, it's dishonest money that is so destructive. Money is obviously something all of us have chosen throughout history to use as a medium of exchange if it's honest. Taxes are good. Capitalism is evil. These are the mind traps, and I'm not going to go through them here because there isn't any time, much less time to go all through them. But what's so encouraging to me is that this is not only true, and it's something I can finally commit my spirit to 100%. You know, the first major discovery of my life was Aikido. I had trained in other martial arts, and I just kept quitting because I didn't want to stand there practicing, you know, driving somebody's nose through their brain. It just didn't feel good to me. I finally found Aikido, and it's like, oh, I can commit my spirit 100% to blending and protecting, you know, resolving conflict without having to injure people. The second one was free energy, when I realized, okay, if we don't crush and fuse and all that stuff, we can blend with the universal toroidal pattern. It'll give us all the energy we could ever need. It's like, oh, that's the Taurus applied in self-defense, in energy. And the third one is the Taurus applied at the human level, is not to the group, it's to the individual. And if we begin with honoring that and are rigorous about all systems being grown organically without violation of that fundamental system, that to me is the turning point for humanity. So I wish we had time to go further, and this is the conversation I'll be in with the rest of my life. So if you are particularly interested in this topic, I mean, like really you want to do some homework on it. I mentioned my son yesterday, and he's written a book that lays out a lot of these principles and the myths and so forth in a very user-friendly way. And I brought a few of those books. I don't have a lot of them. You can get them online. The book is The Secrets to Nonviolent Prosperity. The subtitle is the Principles of Liberty, and his name is Trevor Gamble. I've got just a few copies I'll give out to the people if you're really passionately interested or are going to read it. Trevor Gamble. Oh, The Secrets to Nonviolent Prosperity. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close. I'm going to thank you very much for your attention and for entertaining this question.